basically get a I want us to actually have an understanding as far as where this man is coming from, and what has been doing, what's he all about. So his full name is, as you'll see, it's Maulana Jalaluddin Muhammad Rumi. That is his full name. Now, the other names that you may hear is, Jalaluddin Muhammad Balkhi, and also Maulana or Molavi. In For Iranians, mainly Maulana and Molavi is what they refer to him as. In the West, he's been basically branded as Rumi, and if again, you'll see different variations of how his name is put together and so forth. He was born in September 30th of 1207, in the AC, after Christ, and in Balkh, which it used to be part of Khorasan, which is a province of Iran, and now it's present day it's in Afghanistan. And he died in Konya in Turkey in 1273. Rumi is interesting because people from Afghanistan believes that he is from Afghanistan, and Iranians also believe that he is from Iran because his poems are all in Farsi. Well, not entirely, but majority of them are in Farsi. And then, of course, people from Turkey believes that he's Turkish because he was buried there and he actually lived there, and he does have some Turkish poems as well. What you guys will realize and understand eventually is that he really doesn't belong to anywhere. The guy, Rumi, I believe it wouldn't be a bad statement to say that he is very universal. And from what I have gathered, and where more and more as I have been teaching and I've been studying his poetry and the way his poetry has been used across the globe, there is no way that somebody who was only a specific who was only for his specific origin or a region could have done this unless he was thinking and he was acting universally. In his life, of course, when he was 12 years old, they migrated from Balkh to, because of the Mongol invasion that was happening through the current, India region, as the Mongols were coming through to come to Iran. And as they were going west, they passed through Neyshabur, which is a city in the province of Khorasan in Iran. And in there, he meets another Iranian poet named Fariduddin Attar. Some of you may know Attar by one of his books, which is called Mantiq al-Tayr. And he's got other, books as well, and we'll go through another one of them in a moment, which is called Asrar Name. So Attar, once he sees Rumi, he actually realizes that there is a certain level of spiritual greatness within him, and gives him a copy of the book Asrar Name, or what's called the Book of Secrets. And he tells Rumi's father that your son at one point will do something that he would burn the entire universe. And I'm not translating this right from Farsi, as the words in Farsi actually means much better. However, if I were to reiterate on this, what that means is that with his words, he will enter everybody's hearts and he will just burn them. And we'll see what that means eventually, of course. Rumi does acknowledge the influence that, Attar and other great philosophers and, mystic philosophers have had on him, especially Sanai. Of course, in a line, he talks about Attar was the spirit, Sanai was the I twain, and in the time thereafter came I in the train, which basically, if I were to refer to Sanai, for some of you who have seen the movie The Shape of Water, if you look at the very end of the credits, there is a there's a line that the director actually does credit the great Iranian poet Sanai for the influence that he had in that movie, Shape of Water. And if that is not enough, there, you can go into the Twitter account of, I forgot the name of the director, but in there he actually speaks greatly about how he actually put together the movie's scenario, and how Sanai's, how he actually came to Sanai's poem, and how that actually influenced them. So the biggest question and the biggest mystical interaction that changed Rumi's life is the interaction that he has with a gentleman named Shams, or Shams Tabrizi. And the stories are in various ways and various versions. Of course, the one version which is pretty common is about the fact that one day Rumi is coming back from the mosque, because he was an imam, or somebody who would lead prayers, and Shams intercepts his his way, and asks him a question that that question is, tell me who is greater in your eyes, Prophet Muhammad or Bayazid Bastami? And as Prophet Muhammad, and he then recites these lines that Prophet Muhammad has said, I worship you, God, whom I still don't know you as you are deserving. Or Bayazid, who says, how great am I, and I worship me, who has all God in his greatness within myself. So once apparently Shams poses these two questions to Rumi just immediately he reacts, and he tells them that this is not anything nice to actually even ask about, and perhaps you should rethink your statement or something like that. But eventually, once he gets home and he's not in the sight of his followers, he asks his friend to actually go and grab this guy Shams, and then he starts talking about these questions. Their encounter lasts about 16 months of conversation between the two of them. This is a well-known fact as well, that Rumi was instructed by Shams not to read any books or study anything, and they had to have a conversation amongst themselves. And eventually, Shams leaves Rumi after 16 months. And the first time he leaves, Rumi sends all sorts of people to find him, and they find him and they bring him back, and he stays for another couple of months, and then he leaves and he disappears forever. There is a book which is called 40 Rules of Love, which is done by a Turkish writer. In case you guys are interested, it's a book which is in form of a novel. However, it actually talks about Shams in there, and the book is done very, very nicely. It's got a great in Farsi. It's called um, Millat Ishq, or the People of Love, and in English, I think it's called the 40 Rules of Love. I can get you that information as well in case you guys want to, have another material to read and so forth. Anyways, this encounter leads Rumi to understand love. So he gets to understand what love is. And this is something that I know some of us believe that we know it, and some of us believe that we are still working on it, and some of us, we believe that, it's everything in this world, and some of us may believe that it's something that's supposed to just happen one day or not. However, we're going to see this, and as we study Masnavi, we're going to understand love from his point of view. And he is extremely diligent, and he's extremely detailed about what love is. And I'm excited about that part, because that's basically what I think his greatest gift to us is, that to actually help us understand what love is. So having said that, I want to add another thing. As we go forward, if we're all together still, you guys, I will be asking you guys to watch some movies as well, as part of class assignments. And that's just because there are certain movies that have completely taken certain concepts and the subjects that Maulana has been teaching, and these concepts and subjects are all intertwined with the movie itself. And it's just, I think it's something that all of us should we would also enjoy. Some of you may have already seen. So for instance, about a week ago, I saw the entire three parts of Matrix, the movie Matrix. Some of you guys may have seen it, some of you guys may not, but that's one of the movies that I actually would highly encourage you guys to actually see, and then we can go from there as far as certain conversation and discussions. So that's something else that I forgot to put in the notes here. Any questions so far about what we've gone through? Can I ask you guys to take a moment, and if I can ask, it's about 9 of us in here. If you guys can take a moment, and now that I've gone through what this journey is going to be, and at least how I saw put it together, can you guys also tell me what is it that you're expecting to get out of this class? So who wants to go first? Or I can call people.
I'll go first, Mohsen.
All right. Well, you can go.
So I think I've always been interested in learning more about Rumi, but obviously my Farsi is very limited to conversational. So I'm excited. I've read Rumi in English, but I've never, to be honest with you, read like an entire book. I've read 40 Rules of Love. I've read like parts of his books, but I think what I'm looking for is just to get to know his advice and his poems in more of an in-depth level, rather than the snippets I've gotten throughout the years, and hopefully build on my own spiritual journey.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Who wants to go next?
I can go next.
Sure.
So my first introduction to Rumi was not actually to Rumi, it was to Iqbal Lahori, who is a student of Rumi, and he basically introduced Pakistanis and Urdu-speaking people to Rumi's literature. And many Pakistanis don't know that, and they would actually argue that that's not the case. So that's where I developed interest, and I'm back to basically learn in a more holistic way, just broaden my horizon.
Awesome.
And to hang out with you, of course.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Sadi. All right.
I'll go next.
Sure.
Salam.
I've never met you, Mr. Rasul Malayeri.
Malayeri.
Very
Yes.
nice meeting you, sir.
Nice to meet everybody. I'm a friend of Mohsen Majerdian. I'm from Atlanta. Actually, I'm in Atlanta.
Awesome. Okay.
So I may not last the whole 2 hours because it will be midnight my time.
Okay.
But I'll do my best to stay. And I'm going to be like a sponge. Just take everything in. I've obviously read, and studied in Farsi, but never done it in English. So this will be novel for me, and I'll glad to be active participant.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right.
I can go next.
Sure.
Okay, I have been privileged to be your student for the last 6 years in Farsi class, and obviously enjoyed greatly. And there are so many times that, I am talking with American friends, and I do want to basically talk about Rumi, but it is very, very difficult to clearly tell them what is that about. So I thought it's the best thing to come to the English class and hopefully educate myself to first remind me what we learned in Farsi, and then have some kind of, translation skills of, talking with friends about Rumi. That's basically my purpose.
Awesome. Good to have you, sir.
Thank you.
And I guess I'll go. So, hello, my name is Mathien. I introduced to Rumi when I was living in Seattle a while ago. And I took your class on the early incantation many years ago. I think familiar with Coleman Barks translations and that kind of stuff. So hoping to learn just more deeply in the Masnavi and just know more about the background of the stories and connect that to spirituality.
Awesome. Good to have you, Mathien.
I can go. My name's Netta. Hi. Morv already told me about this class. I don't know too much about Rumi, and I haven't studied that much. I've read a few poems here and there, but I am interested in learning more. And I was interested in the English class too, because I'm more conversational Farsi. So, yeah.
Great. Good to have you, Neda. All right, Mr. Rafi, you're next.
Okay. Well, thank you for this class. As Mohsen said, the other Mohsen, I have also been attending the Persian class, Farsi classes. My main goal attending these classes, learning about Rumi, is basically I want to learn about Islam. I want to learn about God. I guess learning is it's not the correct word, but maybe take a dive in that ocean.
Okay, awesome. And Solma's just texted me that I'm not going to talk. So she's a friend of mine, she's observing, which is fine. All right, great. So without further ado, let's just go and, let's dive in. Let's dive into our first few lines of Masnavi. So for those of you who may not know, Masnavi consists of 6 books. That's the best way I can actually describe it, which is, each book have got somewhere close to about 3,000 to 4,000 lines of poetry. I mean, lines of poems. So if you were to multiply that, there's about 24,000 lines of poems for just Masnavi itself. Maulana does have another book, which is pretty famous. Normally, people refer to that as Divan Shams Tabrizi, or Shams's poetry, which in this case, the reason it's called Divan Shams is because the style of poetry in that book is what they call ghazals, which are segments of very closely rhymed lines, which every ending refers to that name, or not everyone, but majority of the endings refers to the name Shams. So most people mistakenly believe that that book is written by Shams, but that's not the case. The book is written by, of course, it's not written. These are poetries that has been recited by Maulana or Rumi. And what happens is a couple of things that we should also touch upon here. Rumi himself says that I am not a poet. It's very important for everyone to believe this, that the guy was not a poet. Now, in contrast to Rumi, you have somebody like Hafez, for instance. Hafez was a poet as well as a mystical philosopher, because the way he would write his poetry, he is very, very detail oriented. It's been told that Hafez would, write his poetry, he would distribute it to people, he would take feedbacks, and then he would correct them, and then again he would redistribute them and so forth. So that's how Hafez did his work. So he is more in the poet category. Of course, I have a great respect for Hafez as well, and for what he has done. But Rumi is just exceptional because the poetry is something that he just said. He never went back to it, he never corrected anything, and he just says it. And he says it as it comes to him. You guys will hopefully come to these stories where he actually does talk about how he is reciting. And one of the things that Rumi says is that every time that I'm connected to the source, I get to say what I say. And if I'm not connected to the source, I can't talk. We're going to talk about as far as what this source is eventually. So that's just an introduction as to what Masnavi is. So the very first book that was put together, and I emphasize on the fact that it was put together because Maulana or Rumi was not into putting or publishing a book. There were people who would actually write these poetries as he was actually saying them, and they would actually put them in a book or in some sort of a thing to collection of poetry or something like that. The first one is actually Shams, is the Divan Shams Tabrizi is the very first book that was basically published or put together. 15 years later, a friend of his, which you guys will see his name in Masnavi poetry, named Hesamuddin, comes and tells him that your poetry needs some sort of a way for people to understand what you mean. So why don't you try to actually put something together so that people can read that and understand what is it that they are reading or they're understanding. So that's when Maulana starts to put together or recite what is put together as the 6 different books of Masnavi. Each of the books of Masnavi have taken about 2 years to put together, or for the recitation of them. And some of them there have been very little delays between majority of them, except with one, which again, Maulana, when we get to it, you'll see that there's been a 2-year gap. So literally it has taken him another 15 years to put Masnavi together. This kind of gives us a greater understanding as far as what this really means, and how was this whole thing put to again collected and of course presented to everyone, because there is great wealth of knowledge, and there's great wealth of heartfelt information that I can only tell you that folks like Tony Robbins or Wayne Dyer or Deepak Chopra, or any of these, you read any of these people's books, or you listen to them and so forth, you can actually hear them refer to certain poetry or certain lines from Masnavi. It is amazing, and there's just many translation of Masnavi, which is the fact of the matter is that everyone who has found out about it, they have kind of got to grasp what they could, and they have written about it, which is fantastic. So the very first, by the way, the way I wanted to actually, and you guys tell me how comfortable you guys are with this. The way I wanted to go with this is I could actually start reciting about 4 or 6 lines, because every 2 lines is one, line of poetry. And then, just kind of, I want to go and translate them and explain them, but I wanted you guys to also participate. So whoever is comfortable reading the poetry, I would like to actually defer to them as well, so that they could actually read the next 4 lines or the next 4 lines, and so on and so forth. I think all of us are, English is our second language. Well, more or less. Of course, we've got, people who are well-versed and people who are not so well-versed. But if you don't mind it, I think, that would actually kind of gives us a better collaboration towards this, and we go forward. Now, what I will be also translating or explaining is I'm going to actually do it through what I have done in Farsi class, which is, my understanding of the line itself and the poetry line, and then I would refer to what I need to refer to from, different sources, and you guys will hear that too. So I'll go first, and then I'll open it up. If anybody wants to participate, fine. If not, I'll keep on going. I've actually practiced this few lines for now. So this is called, at the very beginning of book 1, it's called The Song of the Reed. And in this case, Maulana is referring to himself. The reed is him. So here you go. This is how it goes. Now listen to this reed flute's deep lament about the heartache being apart has meant. Since from the reed bed they uprooted me, my songs express each human's agony. So he is basically inviting everyone to hear from him, in this case, as he's referring to himself as the reed. He wants everyone to kind of to listen to him as he is talking about this heartache of what he calls the separation. Now, the entire Masnavi is a book of love as well as a book of heartache, and the heartache is the pain of separation. He talks about this all the time. He does believe that he was once with the source, the divine source that has created all of us. And as he actually uses the words here, you see, he feels that, you know, we were uprooted and then sent to this life here in this earth to experience what we need to experience. So the very first line, he basically asks you to listen. Another thing that you need to remember is the fact that Maulana would refer to a lot of things as you need to listen. You will hear this a lot. And we're going to go through examples of it just to give you a glimpse of this stuff. When he's referring to us as listening, to listen, he does believe that listening does help us be harmonized with the divine melody. Let me put it in another form. Those of you who do yoga, one of the things that you guys do is you actually do meditation. Sometimes you guys do meditation or meditative yoga. The way it is that you actually completely become present. You actually are in a state of, I don't want to say that you go silent, but at the same time, you want the surroundings to be completely, empty of noise, so that you can start understanding what is deep within yourself. So the part that he comes back and asks everyone to listen is something that, he believes the more we listen, the better we understand how this life and our journey works. Okay. So it's about the heartache. Of course, he's been uprooted from his source, from the divine source that he belonged. And he wants to talk about this because he was taken away from where he felt content, where he felt happy, and now he's in a different state. Since the reed bed they uprooted me, my songs express each human's agony. Another point that I need to actually say in here is that, he talks about the reed. And in this case, the reed itself is something that they make a flute, or that, it is the musical instrument flute that they actually make from it. And one of the things that Maulana is referring to in here is that the only way that you can listen to a flute as it is being, as it's being, played, is that the instrument itself needs to be completely empty from within. If the instrument is not empty, it cannot play any sort of songs or any sort of music. And this emptiness within him that's why he's referring to himself as the reed. And he believes that this is, the empty reed, which is being, played, and he wants to talk about what's going on. Does that make sense? So, since the reed bed they uprooted me, my songs express each human's agony. And in this case, the translation is not doing justice to what the Farsi version is. When he's talking about human's agony, he's talking about the pain and suffering that he has gone through, and how that pain and suffering has been played. Okay. And he's talking about that. A breast which separation split in two is what I seek to share this pain with you. So what he's now asking is, he wants an open heart. Unfortunately, again, the translation is, is a little verbatim. But what he's looking at is he wants an open heart. And he wants an open heart which has been split in two. And the reason it needs to be split into, it's not necessarily split in two, it's been, cut from within. The reason is that every time there is a cut in there, the light is is able to actually enter into the heart. There is another, I know you guys may have seen this already. There is a famous quote of Rumi that's going around, which he talks about the wound is where the light enters. And that's basically what he's referring to in here, that I want my heart to be completely, cut up so that the light keeps going in it. And the only hearts who can understand what I'm saying are the hearts which have been cut up. So a breast which separation split in two is what I seek to share this pain with you. So unless you have a heart like that, you will not understand what I'm, basically saying. You won't not understand what I'm talking about. When kept from their true origin, all yearn for union on the day they can return. So in this case, he's saying that anyone who has been away from where they actually belong, they all try to look into when is it the time, when it's the time for them to actually get back to their origin. So this is basically him just talking about his journey as far as how painful this journey has been. Amongst the crowd alone, I mourn my fate. With good and bad, I've learned to integrate. He also talks about the fact that he has been telling his tale and his stories to anyone who wanted to listen, who wanted to get an understanding as far as what he meant or what was done within his journey. And in this case, he's talking about, I actually became part of or mingled with people who were good and who were bad. Or in this case, he's talking about any crowd, good or bad. In this case, good or bad doesn't necessarily mean that they were ill-fated people or anything like that. It's just that there are people who sometimes are within our discourse understanding and our discourse, our discourse closeness of understanding of the heart, and there are some that are completely separated from us. And in this case, it's like I've talked in both ways to both of them, to both groups in a way. That we were friends, each one was satisfied, but none sought out my secrets from inside. So in this mingling that he's talking about, in the fact that in this mingling, another thing that he's talking about is the, the experience of life as he actually went through life's journey. So in this experience of life, as he went through this journey, he's saying that people wanted to first come and understand, where did this belief of mine came from? And none of them, if they just were curious about it, none of them could understand what I was talking about or what I was saying. Because what he says is not something that can be understood by the mind. It's something that needs to be understood by the heart. So if you're curious, you can never understand him. But if you open your heart, that's when you actually get what he wants. Okay. Now, is anybody willing to recite the next 4 lines?
I don't mind reciting, but it's nearly impossible to read from your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, hold on. I can actually change that. That's good to know. Okay, how's this?
Much better.
All right, so
where were we?
So we were here. But none sought out my secret from inside. So my deepest, that's yours.
My deepest secrets in this song I wail. that eyes and ears can't penetrate the veil. Body and soul are joined to form one whole, but no one is allowed to see the soul.
Awesome. Okay, very good. So what he's talking about in here is that they, so he's basically coming back and says, anyone who comes and they, again, this goes back into people wanting to understand him with their minds. And he's coming back and saying that every time that you want to engage your mind, what you're going to engage with is your eyes and ears. And these eyes and ears, because the eyes and ears that we have they belong to this body. And he's talking about the eyes and ears that are, sensual, and they work with our body as our body actually goes through our, our daily lives. He's saying that these things can understand what I have gone through. And then he basically gives an example. Is like the soul and the body are together. That's how you know that the body is alive, right? The soul and the body are together. However, you can never see the soul. You only see the body. And that's because with our conscious senses, we cannot penetrate this veil of the meanings behind. So right off the bat, he's talking about, and he's setting forth certain standards that here is how you can actually engage with what I'm saying. You have to let go of what is your senses and your needy body, and you need to open up your heart, and you need to open up your soul in order to actually understand what I'm saying. Actually, you did so good. Sunny, can you give me another 4 lines, please?
Sure. But no one is allowed to see the soul. Did we finish it?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, all right. Actually, I can't see the bottom of your screen.
Sorry.
No worries.
That's my bad.
No
I gotta
worries.
figure this out eventually.
Yeah,
okay.
Better. It's fire, not just hot air, the reed flutes cry. If you don't have this fire, then you should die. Love's fire is what makes every reed flute pine. Love's fervor thus lends potency to wine.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, it's fire, not just hot air, the reed's flute cry. So he's talking about, again, the reed. Now that we have established that the reed is him, he's saying that what I'm saying is something that has got substance within it and it has meanings behind it. It's just not hot air. And in order for you to understand, you have to have a fire within you. So this fire is not necessarily he's not talking about a fire to actually burn things. He's talking about a fire that actually brings you to wanting something more and more. Let me give you another example. Like, for instance, there is, so you say that, I desire something from my heart. I have this fire to do this. So it's like you need to have this fire of wanting to understand these meanings. And then the line that he says that if you don't have this fire, you should die, it doesn't necessarily mean that. He's saying if you don't have this fire, then you will not be. So it's about being and not being. So some of you guys have heard about this thing called to be or not to be, right? And in this case, when you're talking about something which is to be, means that it exists. And the not to be is, of course, whatever that is not in the be is somewhere else, hopefully, which we haven't discovered. I mean, when you look at it philosophically. The fact of the matter is that in order for us to penetrate this veil and get this, we need to have this desire. And this desire, if we have it, it would bring us to a being. And if we don't have it, then we're not that being anymore. So that's why it says the reality in the real in Farsi, it says nist bad, or not be. So either you want to become alive and well. So that's why I actually want you guys to see the movie Matrix, because in the movie Matrix, the red pill and the blue pill kind of talks about this. Now, I don't want to get too much into it, but the reality is that there is an existence that we perceive that we have, and there's an existence that Molavi or Rumi believes that we should have. And he's talking about that existence. And anything else but that, he feels, he's like, you're dead to me, basically. That's where the word die basically comes in, okay? Is that making sense? All right. Morijan, can you read any of the lines? Do you see it?
I think so. Let me, we left off after wine. Let me just, sure. The reed consoles those forced to be apart. Its notes will lift the veil upon your heart. Whereas antidote or poison like its song or, oh my gosh, sorry, something happened at the page.
I moved it, sorry. Never mind. Go ahead.
No worries. Okay, so let me start again. The reed consoles those forced to be apart. Its notes will lift the veil upon your heart. Wears antidote or poison like its song or confidant or one who pines for so long. This reed relates a tortuous path ahead. It recalls the love with which Majnun's heart bled.
Awesome. Okay, hold it right there. Thank you. So basically, he's now going through he wants to talk about this. He wants to talk about this fire. And he says, this fire is love's fire. It's what makes every reed flute pine. So basically, he's now giving us a clue into this fire that he's talking about. It's like, it's the love's fire that we need to start finding it within ourselves, okay? And it says, it's basically, the second line, it's referring to the fact that wine is something that majority of mystical poets refer to. They refer to it all the time. And what's interesting about wine and what they love about it is the fact that the way wine makes itself is that it actually does have its own fire. I mean, just to give you guys a quick understanding of this, when wine is made, basically the grapes, thank you. So the grape, as it's being put in the containers and so forth, they just let it sit there for a while, and the grape starts kind of generating and regenerating this wine, which actually comes from within itself. They don't add anything else into it. Now, there is a mystical meaning behind it, which means that Maulana wants us to actually have our happiness and our fires from within ourselves, not from outside of ourselves. So this is important, to actually start looking within ourselves rather than from from outside. Just to expand on this, just in Masnavi, in some other parts which we'll get to eventually in the months to come, he talks about the fact that people are happy and their happiness comes to them from outside of themselves. And every time the happiness from outside keeps on coming to you, you feel good. And once one of those happy, connections are cut, then all of a sudden you're unhappy. You feel sad. give you a further example on this, like for instance, whatever is happening right now with the coronavirus. The coronavirus, put our social life into a complete halt, and it, disrupted a lot of social activities and calendars that we had booked. Some people, I'm going to say majority of us, are not happy about it because we need that social interaction and all that, which personally I'm also part of it. But in true understanding of what Maulana or Rumi says, this should not have affected us. This should have been just life. And we should still be happy. And we should still deserve the happiness that we have always wanted, and just stay with it, because Maulana believes that this is all right. And this is how life has been put together for us. So the next line, it says, the reed is, the reed consoles those forced to be apart. Now, he's talking about, in this case, somebody like himself. With their words and their teachings, they try to put some sort of a healing power or healing methods on those who were forced to be apart. Now, being apart in this case is talking about us being apart from our source. Every time we're apart from our source, we're sad. And every time we get closer to our source, we become happier. This is what, for instance, in a majority of the Western teachings, they talk about your balance. When you're balanced, every time you provide a balance within yourself, that means that you are actually in harmony with your source, and you are, aligned with it, or the alignment with the source. This is exactly what Maulana is talking about here, that it does, the reed consoles those forced to be apart. Its notes will lift the veil upon your heart. Now, in this case, it says every time, and in this case, the notes, he's talking about the notes of music. So he does believe, just like the old Greek philosophers, because this comes from actually Greek philosophy, and Maulana did know, the philosophy of, Socrates and so on and so forth. They believe that the entire universe is built upon a divine melody. And every time you are one with that divine melody, you are happy, and you are, completely in the right tune with it. Now, in this case, he says that what I can provide, or what I would give you, is an understanding and a pathway for you to understand the divine melody. Okay. And once you get that, the veil, which completely covers your heart and doesn't allow the light of love to shine into it, is going to start to be lifted apart. Okay. And then he says, where is the antidote or poison like this song? And he kind of brags about this here. He's like, you know what? Have you ever seen something, an antidote, or or a poison? In this case, it's like, I give you the pain, and also I'll give you the antidote for it. Have you ever seen anyone do this best? Okay. And have you ever, or confident, or one who's pinned so long? And in this case, it's talking about, have you seen somebody who's been so, if I were to actually give you guys the Farsi translation of it, somebody who has been so eager to talk about this, and or so eager to actually give you all that. Have you ever seen this? So he's kind of like giving himself some bragging rights about this. And then he says, the reed, where am I? I have to do this better. but I know you guys will excuse me because it's my first session. This read relates to torturous path ahead, recalls the love with which Majnun's heart bled. He's talking about the fact that what I'm telling you, or what you will recite and read and understand, is that it's going to talk about the difficult path that's ahead of you. This difficult path is the path for you to understand what is causing your pain from within yourself, and how you can heal that pain from within yourself. And now he's referring to of course, is like, the way I will be telling you this is that I will tell you a bunch of love stories, just like how, and there is a famous love story in Iranian literature, which is called Layli or Majnun, just like, Romeo and Juliet or something like that. In this case, he's referring to that, is like, I will give you what actually made Majnun's heart bled. Majnun is the guy who actually was crazy about this, girl who was, her name was Layli. Later on, you guys will read this poem that, somebody, once they see Layli, they're like, wait a second, she doesn't look that pretty. And the answer to them is that, well, you're not Majnun, so therefore you don't see the beauty that you're supposed to see within them. So in this case, Maulana is basically now telling us that I will show you this path, and the path is inwards. You have to go in within yourself to actually see this. However, it's going to be torturous and it's going to be difficult. Can we get 3 more? Am I on the right place? Okay.
Mohsen, I have a question.
Sure.
So the path that he's referring to being torturous is the path to basically discovering yourself and going within. Okay, sorry.
Absolutely. So let me just kind of lay it out for you. So it's about discovering who you are, discovering what causes you the pain, and how to heal the pain. Those 3 main points is basically this path. So it's interesting. We're simplifying it here, and he's going to start giving us anecdotes that are going to kind of show us how this is done. And as we go through it one by one, we realize how difficult it is. Like for instance, for those of you who've read Masnavi with me before, one of the things that he says is that every time a pain comes your way, do not fight it. Become friends with it. And just go with it. Have faith that this pain is a gift. Now imagine in our daily lives, as we go through our problems, we're supposed to feel and believe that the pain is a gift. So, and it is almost, I don't want to say it's almost impossible, but it's really difficult. Okay, all right. Actually, Morijun, give me another, like 3 more.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Sorry, I hear my kids screaming in the background
It's
as
all
I
right.
unmute my. The few, Audrey, Mama. The few who hear the truth the reed has sung have lost their wits so they can speak this tongue. The day is wasted if it's spent in grief, consumed by burning aches without relief. Good times have long passed, but we couldn't care. When you're with us, our friend, beyond compare.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll do these 3 and then we're going to adjourn the class. So he's talking about, he said that I'm going to talk about the torturous path, right? Now, he says there is a few who have heard this and they have totally understood it. And the way they have done it is that they have, in order to get this, they had to give up something, have lost their wits so they can speak this tongue. There is something that they had to give up in order for them to be able to talk like this, right? Now, consumed by burning aches without relief, all right? Good times have long passed, but we couldn't care. Or in this case, yeah, not everything rhymes correctly. Okay, so the day is wasted if it's spent in grief, consumed by burning aches without grief. Okay, so every time, you know, in this case, the grief that he's talking about, the day is wasted if it's spent in grief. Unless your grief is about grieving for love, your day is a wasted day. And in this case, the love that he's talking about, again, is that connection, is the fact that how is it that I can actually get closer to my source? How is it that I can actually create that balance within myself? It's like, unless you are spending your day doing that, it is a wasted day. Because now another thing that, you know, he's emphasizing on the fact that, you know, what is it that we are grieving on? Because everything else in his eyes is just child play. The day wasted if it's spent in grief, consumed by burning aches without relief. And in this case, what he believes is that there is going to be relief, and if we continue on wanting to understand how the path to love actually works. Okay. And all right. Good times have long passed, but we couldn't care. When you're with us, our friend beyond compare. All right. I think in this case, how should I put this? Okay. There is a point where Rumi talks about time, which he doesn't believe in time and space. In majority of his holistic teachings, he believes that time and space is something that has completely limited us. He believes that we're given a time when we're in this earth, and once we, we have to do what we have to do for the allotted time that we're given in order to find ourselves. And if we don't find ourselves, that time is gone to waste. Okay, so he's now talking about the fact that, all right, if my day was spent without understanding who I am and and what is within me, that time is a wasted time. If, however, you were with me, if I was closer to my divine source, if I was closer to my love, then that time is the right time spent, and I would be completely content and happy where I am. Okay. So when you're with us, our friend beyond compare. So in this case, when he's talking about you are with us, this is, and again, this is a shortcoming of the translation, but it's not something that is outside of him. It's something that within him, but he needs to find it. And once he finds it, then him and the love are both together. And this is exactly what it is that he doesn't see, and in a few lines as we actually go through in the next, hopefully the next time, in the next few lines, he's going to talk about what is the relationship between the lover and the love. And I'm going to have to tell you guys this because you have to understand what this line is. He doesn't believe that there is a lover. He believes that there's only love. So if you love somebody, in his opinion and in his explanation, if you love somebody, what that means is that you have completely allowed yourself to become your lover. So that means that you're completely empty of you and what is in you. Okay. So that means that in order for this equation to work, the lover and the love have to become one. So the oneness that majority of the time we hear, of course, is becoming one with everything which is, you know, around us and so forth. We're going to talk about that later on. But in terms of the lover and the love, there's only one. There's not two. You don't have a lover and a love. It doesn't work. It has to be a lover and love completely conjoined together and become one. Okay. And in this case, when he says, you know, if when you're with us, it's not the right translation, of course, because the line itself, the way it says is like, you have to stay with us, and without, you know, outside of you, there is nothing else. That's what this should have been. However, that's what basically that line brings to us, is that oneness between the lover and the love. Now, I'm going to have to stop right here just because I want to make sure that, you know, you guys can, you know, digest all of this. I know we probably went through quite a bit, although we didn't read more than 16 lines probably. There's 2 more lines that's left for the first 18, but I'm going to actually wait for the rest of them for next time. One of the things that I would ask you to do is to actually, if you would read the first 35 lines of Masnavi, just because it helps kind of get a grasp as far as, you know, where he is coming from, and hopefully come with some questions as your understanding. Once we get past this, you know, 35 lines at the very beginning, or 20 or 30 lines, 30 lines, as we actually get past them, then the rest of this is going to be much easier. In my Farsi class, the first 35 lines took, you know, three sessions. And I'm hoping that I can actually finish this one with you guys in 2 sessions. But the reality is that the meaning behind all of this is just tremendous. He's setting the tone for everything else that he's going to talk about. And as you can tell, it's all about, you know, the fact that how is it that you would become one with love? How is it that you can actually discover the pains within yourselves? And how is it that we can actually heal the pains within ourselves? And he's preparing us for a very torturous yet very enjoyable journey if we actually apply it to ourselves. Any questions? All right. If there are no questions, then I guess I'll see you guys next week at 7 on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mohsen.
Thank you.
It was very nice.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. We enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.